The wagon wheels had barely stopped turning when Owen Hackett saw what they had done to her, and his first instinct was to look away because no human being should have to endure what lay before him in the dust of that Colorado afternoon. But something in the way she held herself, even broken and bleeding on the ground outside the saloon, made him dismount instead of riding past like every other soul in Granite seemed content to do. It was September of 1876, and the mining town had grown mean with gold fever and the kind of lawlessness that came when men forgot they were supposed to be civilized. Owen had been riding through on his way to deliver cattle to a ranch 20 miles north, his saddlebags heavy with the payment from his last job and his conscience clear as the mountain air. He was 26 years old, weathered by sun and work, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Rockies. He had seen his share of trouble in the years since the war ended, but he had tried to keep himself separate from it, to do his work and move on. That instinct died the moment he saw her curled against the hitching post. Her dress was torn, once a respectable blue calico, now streaked with dirt and blood. Her face was swollen, bruised in shades of purple and black that made his stomach turn. One eye was completely shut, the other barely open, and blood had dried in trails from her nose and split lip. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever arrangement it had been in, hanging in tangles around her shoulders. She was trying to push herself up with trembling arms, and every movement seemed to cost her everything. Owen swung down from his horse and crossed the street in 4 long strides. The few people who were out at this hour of the afternoon, when the sun beat down mercilessly and most folks sought shade, turned away deliberately. He could feel their withdrawal like a physical thing, a collective decision that whatever had happened to this woman was none of their concern. "Madam," he said, keeping his voice low and steady as he crouched down a few feet away from her. He did not want to startle her or make her feel trapped. "Madam, can you hear me?" The eye that could open fixed on him with an intensity that surprised him. It was brown, he saw, a rich, dark brown that held none of the defeat he might have expected. Instead, there was a fierce awareness there, a determination that had not been beaten out of her despite everything. "Can you?" she whispered, and her voice was rough, painful to hear. "Can you help me stand?" Owen moved closer, slowly, and offered his hand. "I can help you more than that, madam. Let me get you to the doctor." "No doctor." The words came out sharp, despite how broken she sounded. "No doctor in this town will see me." That stopped him. "What do you mean?" "I mean what I said." She gripped his hand with surprising strength, her fingers cold despite the heat of the day. "Please, just help me away from here." Owen glanced around the street again. Still no one met his eyes. The saloon doors hung motionless in the still air. A bad feeling settled over him like a cold blanket, but he pushed it aside. "Where do you need to go?" "Anywhere but here." He made a decision then that would change everything. "I have a camp about 2 miles out. It is not much, but it is private. I can tend to your injuries there if you tell me what to do." For a long moment, she studied him with that one fierce eye. He wondered what she saw, whether she could tell he meant what he said. Finally, she nodded, just the smallest dip of her chin. Getting her onto his horse was an ordeal that had him sweating and her biting back cries of pain. He could tell that more than her face had been damaged. She moved like someone with cracked or broken ribs, and she favored her left side heavily. When he finally got her settled in the saddle, he swung up behind her, careful not to jostle her more than necessary. "I am Owen Hackett," he said, as he turned his horse away from town. "Owen Henry Hackett, if you want the full measure of it." "Rebecca," she said after a moment. "Rebecca Marie Keller. Well, Miss Keller, you just hold on to the saddle horn and let me know if you need me to stop." She did not respond, but he felt her stiffen her spine, gathering whatever reserves of strength she had left. They rode in silence through the scrub brush and scattered pines, climbing gradually into the foothills where Owen had made his camp near a creek. It was a good spot, sheltered by rocks and trees, with clean water and grass for his horse. He had planned to stay one night before moving on, but those plans were already shifting in his mind. By the time they reached the camp, Rebecca was leaning back against him, her weight a slight pressure against his chest. He could feel the heat of fever starting in her, or maybe it was just the trauma catching up. He dismounted carefully, then helped her down, and this time, when her legs gave out, he caught her and carried her the last few feet to where he had laid out his bedroll. "I know this is not proper," he said, as he set her down gently on the blankets. "But proper can wait until you are not bleeding." "Proper left me lying in the street," Rebecca said, and there was a bitter edge to her ruined voice that cut at him. Owen built up the fire and set water to boiling in his small pot. He had some clean cloth in his saddlebag, meant for emergencies, and he supposed this qualified. When he turned back to her, he found her watching him with that same intensity, as though she were memorizing every movement. "Can you tell me where else you were hurt?" he asked. "Beyond your face?" "Ribs," she said. "Left side. They kicked me when I was down." His jaw tightened. "They?" "3 men, maybe 4. It happened fast." "What did the law say?" Rebecca laughed, and it turned into a cough that had her gasping. When she could speak again, her voice was even rougher. "The law was the one holding the lantern while they did it." Owen sat back on his heels, the water forgotten for a moment. "The sheriff, his deputy, same difference in granite." She tried to shift position and winced. "They wanted me to leave town. I refused, so they made sure I would not have a choice." "Why did they want you gone?" "Because I own the only respectable boarding house in town, and I refused to let them turn it into a brothel." Her good eye blazed with fury. "Because I stood up at the town meeting and said that Granite needed schools and churches, not more gambling halls. Because I am a woman alone, and they thought I would be easy to break." Owen looked at her, really looked at her beyond the injuries, and saw the truth of what she was saying in every line of her body. Even broken and battered, she sat as straight as she could manage. Even with her face destroyed by violence, she met his gaze without flinching. This was a woman who had planted her flag and refused to move, and it had nearly killed her. "They were wrong about the easy part," he said quietly. Something in her expression shifted just slightly. "You believe me?" "I do." "Why?" "Because I saw how the whole town turned away. Because I saw you trying to get up instead of just lying there. Because I have seen bullies before, and I know they travel in packs." He dipped the cloth in the now warm water and wrung it out. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts already." He started with her hands, which were scraped and bloody from where she had tried to protect herself. The water turned pink, then red as he worked. She did not make a sound, though he saw her jaw clench and her good hand curl into a fist against her thigh. When he moved to her face, he went as gently as he knew how, dabbing away the dried blood to see the extent of the damage. Her cheekbone was fractured, he thought, and possibly her jaw. Her nose might be broken. The swelling was so severe that he truly could not tell what she normally looked like, and he found himself wondering about that even as he worked. When he finally sat back, she looked marginally better, at least clean, though the bruises were already darkening further. "I need to wrap your ribs," he said. "That means you will need to remove your dress, or at least lower it enough that I can work." Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risk of him against the risk of leaving her injuries untended. Finally, she nodded. "Turn around while I do it." He turned and stared out at the darkening mountains while he listened to the rustle of fabric and her muffled sounds of pain. When she told him he could turn back, she had managed to lower the top of her dress and hold it in place with one arm, exposing her left side. The bruising there was spectacular and terrible, spreading across her ribs in a pattern that told him exactly where the boots had landed. Owen had served as a field medic during the war, just enough to be useful, and he brought that knowledge to bear now. He felt along her ribs as carefully as he could, and she hissed but did not pull away. 3 ribs cracked at least, maybe 4. He bound them tightly with long strips of cloth, working in silence while the fire crackled and the creek burbled in the background. "Thank you," she said when he was done, and there was something raw in her voice that had nothing to do with her injuries. "No thanks needed." He moved back to give her space to fix her dress. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning." He made her coffee, and a simple meal of beans and hardtack softened in the bean liquid. She ate slowly, painfully, but she ate everything he gave her. He watched her hands shake as she lifted the cup to her split lips, saw the way she had to concentrate on the simple act of swallowing, and his anger at the men who had done this grew into something cold and hard in his chest. As night fell properly and the stars came out in their thousands, Rebecca finally spoke again. "You must think I am stupid for staying when they warned me to leave. I think you are brave. Brave or stubborn. Maybe both. Maybe the same thing." Owen poured himself more coffee, though it was already too strong from sitting too long on the fire. "Where are your people, your family?" "Dead." The word was flat, factual. "My parents died of cholera in Missouri when I was 17. I had an aunt here in Granite. She left me the boarding house when she passed 2 years ago. There is no one else." "What about your husband?" "I have never been married." She said it simply, without shame or apology. "I have run the boarding house on my own since my aunt died. It has been honest work, good work, until the mining company decided they wanted to buy up the whole street and turn it into their own private pleasure district." "And you are in the way." "I am in the way." Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking. "What will you do now?" "I do not know." For the first time, he heard defeat in her voice, just a trace of it. "I cannot go back to town. They made that clear, but the boarding house is all I have. Everything I own is in that building. Then we will get it back." She turned to look at him, surprise clear even in her damaged face. "What?" "We will get your boarding house back. Your life back." He met her gaze steadily. "But not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we make plans." "Why would you do that?" "You do not even know me. I know enough." He stood and added another log to the fire. "I know you are a woman who tried to do right by a town that did wrong by you. I know you have courage enough to stand when most people would have run. And I know that what they did to you was evil. And evil should not be allowed to win just because it is easier to look away." Rebecca was silent for so long he thought maybe she had fallen asleep. But when he glanced over, her eye was still open, still watching him. "You are not what I expected when I saw you ride up." "What did you expect?" "Another man who would use the situation to his advantage. Another person who would see a woman down and think it was an opportunity." The words stung because he knew they were born of hard experience. "I had a sister once," he said quietly. "She died when I was 18, killed by a man who thought he had the right to her because she worked in his house as a maid. I was away at war. I could not protect her." He stared into the fire, seeing things he tried not to remember. "I swore I would never stand by again when I could help." "Some promises you keep, even when they cost you." "I am sorry about your sister. I am sorry about what happened to you." They sat in silence after that, the fire burning down slowly. Owen showed her where he kept his rifle, loaded and ready, and told her to shoot first and ask questions later if anyone approached the camp while he slept. She nodded, taking the weapon with a familiarity that told him she knew how to use it. He made a bed for himself on the other side of the fire, far enough away to be respectful but close enough to help if she needed him in the night. As he lay down and pulled his blanket up, he heard her voice drift across the darkness. "Owen." "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing me." He understood what she meant. Not just for physically seeing her, but for seeing her humanity when everyone else had chosen blindness. "Get some rest, Rebecca. Tomorrow we start fighting back." The night passed slowly. Owen woke several times to check on her and found her sleeping fitfully, whimpering in her dreams. Once she cried out, and he was across the camp in seconds, but she waved him off, eyes wild for a moment before recognition returned. By the time dawn broke over the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of gold and rose, he had a plan forming. Rebecca was already awake when he stirred the fire back to life. She looked worse in the morning light, the bruises darker and more extensive, the swelling, if anything, increased. But her spine was still straight, and when she looked at him, he saw that same fierce determination. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I was beaten and left for dead," she said honestly. "But alive. That counts for something." He made breakfast, more coffee and some salt pork fried, with the last of his beans. While they ate, he laid out his thoughts. "The way I see it, you have three choices. One, you leave Colorado entirely, start fresh somewhere else. Two, you stay here in hiding and try to rebuild in secret. Three, you go back to town and take back what is yours publicly. There's no choice there. I will not run." Her jaw set stubbornly, and he could see it hurt her to do it. "That boarding house is mine. My aunt built it from nothing. She survived her husband dying in a mine collapse, survived the winters and the hard years, and she left it to me because she knew I would keep it honest and good. I will not let them steal it." "Then we go back, but carefully and with a plan." Owen poured them both more coffee. "Tell me about the town. Who is on your side, if anyone?" Rebecca thought about this, her brow furrowing. "Mrs. Chen, who runs the laundry. She has always been kind. Mr. Goldstein at the general store, I think he is a good man, though he stays out of politics. There is a preacher, Reverend Ashford, who gave a sermon about justice 3 weeks ago. The mining company tried to run him out, but the congregation stood by him. That is a start. What about the physical layout? Where is the boarding house in relation to the sheriff's office?" 2 blocks east. The sheriff and his deputy, Jack Hastings, they spend most of their time at the Lucky Strike Saloon. That is owned by the mining company too, or might as well be. "And the boarding house itself? Who is in it now?" "I do not know. When they beat me, they said they would have someone more agreeable running it by morning. They might have moved someone in already, or they might have left it empty to make sure I do not come back." Owen nodded slowly, thinking it through. "Here's what we are going to do. First, we are going to get you healed enough to move around more easily. That means at least a few days of rest. Second, we are going to ride to the next town over, place called Silver Ridge, about a day from here. I know the sheriff there, good man named Peterson. We are going to tell him what happened and see if he can put pressure on the law in Granite." "That will not work," Rebecca said immediately. "Sheriff Peterson has no jurisdiction in Granite, and everyone knows the sheriff there is bought and paid for by the mining company." "Maybe so, but Peterson knows the territorial marshal. And the marshal, he does not take kindly to corruption in his jurisdiction." Owen smiled grimly. "Sometimes you have to go over a man's head when he will not do right." Rebecca stared at him. "You would do that? Involve the marshal? For what they did to you? I would involve the governor if I thought it would help." He finished his coffee and stood. "But first, you need to heal. So today you rest, and I am going to ride back toward town, not into it, but close enough to watch and listen. I want to know what they are saying, whether they think you left or died somewhere in the hills. That is dangerous. So is what you did, standing up to them in the first place." He checked his rifle and his pistol, both in good working order. "I will be back before dark. You keep the fire low and stay hidden. Anyone comes, you shoot if you have to." He rode out, leaving her there, and it felt wrong somehow, abandoning her even temporarily. But he needed information, and she needed rest, and those two needs could not be met at the same time. He circled wide around Granite, coming at it from the north instead of the south where his camp lay. There was a ridge overlooking the town where he could watch the main street through his spyglass, and he settled in there to observe. What he saw made his blood boil. Life in Granite continued as though nothing had happened. People went about their business, visiting the stores, working the claims, moving in and out of the buildings that line the muddy main street. At one point, he saw a man exit the building that must be Rebecca's boarding house, and from the proprietary way he locked the door behind him, Owen guessed they had indeed installed someone new. Around midday, a group of men gathered outside the Lucky Strike saloon. Owen trained his glass on them and counted 6, all armed, all with the look of hired guns rather than honest miners. They talked and laughed, passing a bottle between them, and one of them, a tall man with a deputy's star on his vest, gestured broadly as he spoke. The others laughed at whatever he said, and Owen felt his grip tighten on the spyglass. That would be Jack Hastings, he thought, the man who held the lantern while they beat a woman for refusing to give up her property. The man who wore a badge and used it to terrorize instead of protect. Owen had known men like him during the war, men who took pleasure in power and used any excuse to exercise it cruelly. Such men understood only one language, and it was not reason. He watched until the sun started its descent toward the western peaks, then made his way back to camp. Rebecca was where he had left her, though she had moved enough to wash in the creek. Her hair was damp and pulled back from her face, and even with the bruises, he could start to see her features more clearly. She had high cheekbones and a strong jaw, a straight nose despite the swelling. She was, he realized, quite beautiful under the damage, though it was not her beauty that struck him so much as the intelligence and strength in her expression. "You came back?" she said, as he dismounted. "Said I would. Men do not always do what they say. This one does." He unsaddled his horse and rubbed the animal down while he told her what he had observed. Rebecca listened intently, her face growing grimmer as he described the deputy and his companions. "Hastings," she said when he finished, "he is the worst of them. The sheriff is lazy and corrupt, but Hastings enjoys it. He enjoys hurting people, especially women. There have been rumors about the working girls at the saloon, how he treats them. Then he is due for a reckoning." Owen started preparing their evening meal, something more substantial than breakfast. He had shot a rabbit on his way back to camp, and he set about preparing it for roasting. "But not yet. First we get you healed, and we get the law on our side. The real law." Over the next several days, they fell into a rhythm. Owen hunted and cooked, changed Rebecca's bandages, and made short trips to watch the town. Rebecca rested and grew stronger, the swelling in her face gradually reducing, though the bruises went through spectacular color changes from purple to green to yellow. They talked during the long hours, sharing stories of their lives. Owen told her about growing up in Ohio, about his father who had been a blacksmith and his mother who had taught him to read and write. He told her about the war, though he left out the worst parts, and about his sister Anna, who had been bright and brave and full of life until a man took that life from her. He told her about the years after, drifting from job to job, never settling, always moving because staying still meant thinking too much about things he could not change. Rebecca told him about her childhood in Missouri, about parents who had loved learning and passed that love to her. She spoke of her aunt, a formidable woman who had come west as a young bride and stayed after tragedy made her a widow, who had built the boarding house board by board with her own hands and the help of neighbors. She described taking over after her aunt's death, the pride she felt in continuing that legacy, in providing a safe and clean place for travelers and workers in a town that was growing rougher by the day. "I wanted to make Granite better," she said one evening, as they watched the sunset. "I know that sounds foolish, naive maybe, but I believed that one person could make a difference, that if I just showed people there was another way, they would choose it." "That is not foolish," Owen said. "That is hope. World needs more of that, not less. Hope nearly got me killed." "No, evil men nearly got you killed. That is not the same thing." He turned to look at her and found her already watching him. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that went deeper than words. You cannot give up on hope just because wicked people exist. That would be letting them win twice. On the sixth day after he found her, Rebecca could walk without wincing at every step, and the swelling in her face had gone down enough that he could see her properly. She was lovely, he thought, but more than that, she was real. There was nothing artificial or precious about her. She was a woman who worked with her hands and spoke her mind and did not apologize for taking up space in the world. He found himself drawn to her in ways that went beyond sympathy for what she had endured. He caught himself watching her when she did simple things like brush her hair or wash their dishes in the creek. He noticed how capable her hands were, how precisely she moved, how she thought through each task before beginning it. He liked the sound of her voice, rough as it still was, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something that mattered to her. He liked her strength and her stubbornness, and the way she refused to let what had happened to her define who she was. And he was starting to realize that she watched him too. He saw it in how her gaze followed him when he moved around camp, in how she listened so intently when he spoke, in the small smile that crossed her face when he said something that pleased her. Neither of them spoke of it, not yet. There were more pressing matters to attend to. On the seventh day, Owen saddled his horse and helped Rebecca mount in front of him. She was still tender, still healing, but she was strong enough for the long ride to Silver Ridge. They left before dawn, taking a route that kept them well away from Granite, moving through the high country where the air was thin and cold and the views stretched for miles in every direction. Rebecca rode mostly in silence, but Owen felt her lean back against him as the hours passed, trusting him to keep her safe, to keep them on course. His arm around her waist felt natural, right in a way he had not experienced before. He had known women, had even courted a girl back in Ohio before the war, but nothing had felt like this. This was different, deeper, as though some fundamental piece of himself recognized a matching piece in her. They reached Silver Ridge as the sun was setting, riding into a town that was smaller than Granite but felt more honest. Owen knew the way to the sheriff's office, had been here twice before on cattle drives. He helped Rebecca down from the horse and saw people staring at her bruised face, but this time the stares were concerned rather than deliberately blind. Sheriff Peterson was a man in his 50s, with gray in his beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as they entered his office, and his expression shifted from welcoming to troubled as he took in Rebecca's appearance. "Owen Hackett," he said, standing. "Been a while. And who is this?" "This is Miss Rebecca Marie Keller. She owns a boarding house in Granite, or she did until the deputy sheriff and some hired guns beat her nearly to death and stole it from her." Peterson's face darkened. "Sit down, both of you. Tell me everything." They sat, and Rebecca told her story. She did not spare the details, did not soften what had been done to her. Owen watched Peterson's expression grow grimmer with every sentence. When she finished, the sheriff sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Hastings," he said. "I have heard things about him. Nothing I could prove, but enough to make me uneasy." He looked at Rebecca with sympathy. "Miss Keller, what was done to you is criminal, and I believe every word you said. But you are right that I have no jurisdiction in Granite. That is why we need you to contact the territorial marshal," Owen said. "Already thinking that." Peterson stood and moved to a filing cabinet, pulling out paper and pen. "Marshal Thaddeus Wright is based out of Denver, but he makes circuits through the territory. Happens that he is due through here in about 3 days. I will make sure he knows about this situation." 3 days? Rebecca looked uncertain. "What do we do until then?" "You stay here in Silver Ridge. I will put you both up at the hotel, my expense." Peterson held up a hand when Owen started to protest. "No arguments. This is official business now. Besides, Miss Keller, you need to see a proper doctor. Get those ribs looked at right." They stayed in Silver Ridge, and Owen found himself grateful for the delay. It gave Rebecca more time to heal, gave them both time to prepare for what would come next. The doctor confirmed that her ribs were cracked, but healing well. that her face would mend without permanent damage. The hotel gave them rooms next to each other, and Owen found himself listening through the thin walls at night, making sure she was sleeping peacefully. During the days, they walked around the town, slowly because Rebecca still tired easily. They talked about everything and nothing. Owen learned that she loved music but could not carry a tune, that she missed having a garden, that she dreamed of one day opening a school. Rebecca learned that he had a gift for working with horses, that he carried a book of poetry in his saddlebag, though he would never admit it to most people, that he had been thinking about settling down somewhere, but had never found a place that felt like home. On the third evening, as they sat on the porch of the hotel watching the stars come out, Rebecca turned to him suddenly. "Oh, and why are you doing all this? Really?" He could have given her the answer about his sister, about promises made. But sitting there with her in the soft darkness, he found himself telling the truth that lay underneath. At first, it was about doing right, about not being a man who looks away. But now, he met her eyes. Now it is because I care what happens to you, because I want to see you get justice, because I want to see you smile properly, not wincing through the pain, because I think you are remarkable and I want to be part of whatever comes next for you. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I think you are remarkable too. When this is done, when we get my boarding house back, I would like you to stay. In Granite, I mean, if you want to." "I want to," he said simply. They sat like that, hands joined, until the night grew cold and they went inside. Owen lay in his bed that night thinking about futures he had never let himself imagine before, about a woman with courage enough to match his own, about what it might mean to finally stop drifting and plant roots somewhere. Marshall Wright arrived the next morning, a tall man in his 40s with a face like carved granite and a reputation for incorruptibility. He listened to Rebecca's story, examined the documentation she had brought proving her ownership of the boarding house, and asked pointed questions about the sheriff and his deputy in Granite. When he was done, he sat back and nodded. "I have been hearing troubling things about Granite for a while now," he said. "The mining company there has too much power, and power without oversight breeds corruption. I will ride back with you, and we will sort this out. If what you say is true, Miss Keller, and I believe it is, then there will be consequences." They left that afternoon, a party of 4 now. Rebecca, Owen, Marshall Wright, and a deputy marshal named Samuel Cortez, who served as Wright's second. They rode hard, making good time, and camped one night on the trail. Around the fire, the marshal told them about other towns he had cleaned up, other corrupt officials he had removed. His message was clear. The law would prevail, even in rough places, even when it took time. They rode into Granite at midday, when the streets were full, and everyone could see them coming. Owen saw heads turn, saw people stop what they were doing to stare. Rebecca sat straight in her saddle, her chin high despite the fading bruises on her face. The marshal rode with the confidence of a man who knew his authority was absolute. They went straight to the sheriff's office. The sheriff, a heavy-set man named Dudley with sweat stains on his shirt, looked up as they entered and his face went pale. "Marshal Wright, this is unexpected." "I am sure it is." Wright's voice was cold. "Where's your deputy, Hastings?" "Out on patrol, I imagine." "Then you will send someone to find him now." The marshal's tone left no room for argument. While they waited, Wright examined the sheriff's records, asking questions that Dudley answered with increasing nervousness. Owen stood near Rebecca, ready to intervene if needed, but the marshal had the situation well in hand. When Hastings finally arrived, swaggering through the door with a confidence that died the moment he saw Wright's badge, the marshal did not waste time. "Jack Hastings, you are under arrest for assault, attempted murder, and theft under color of law. You have the right to defend yourself in court, but as of this moment, you are stripped of your badge and your authority." Hastings started to protest, started to reach for his gun, but Cortez was faster. In seconds, the deputy was disarmed and in handcuffs, his face red with rage. "You cannot do this. The company will not stand for it." The company has no say in territorial law, Wright said flatly. He turned to Sheriff Dudley. You have a choice. Resign now and leave this territory, or face charges as an accessory. Which will it be? Dudley did not even hesitate. He unpinned his badge and set it on the desk with shaking hands. I will be gone by morning. See that you are. Wright picked up the badge and looked around the office. His gaze landed on Owen. You, Hackett. Peterson spoke highly of you. I need an honest man to wear this badge until the town can elect someone properly. You interested in serving as sheriff temporarily? Owen blinked, surprised. He glanced at Rebecca, who was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. I am not a lawman, Marshal. But you are honest, and you have courage, and you know right from wrong. That is more than what this town has had. Wright held out the badge. It would be for a few months at most, just until things settle down. Will you do it? Owen took the badge, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Then he looked at Rebecca again, and this time he could read her expression clearly. It was trust and hope and something deeper that made his heart beat faster. I will do it. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Wright had Hastings locked in a cell and sent word to several of the hired guns that they were no longer welcome in town. With Cortez backing him up and Owen now wearing a badge, the message was clear. The old order was done. Rebecca went to her boarding house and Owen went with her, badge or no badge. The man who had been installed as the new manager tried to bar the door, but one look at Owen's face and the star on his chest convinced him otherwise. They found the building mostly undamaged, though some of Rebecca's personal belongings had been rifled through. She walked through the room slowly, touching the furniture she had polished, the curtains she had sewn, reclaiming her space with quiet determination. It is still mine, she said softly. They could not take that. No, Owen agreed. They could not. Over the following weeks, Granite transformed. Marshal Wright stayed for 10 days, making sure the change of power stuck. Several of the mining company's most aggressive enforcers left town rather than face charges. The company itself, faced with federal scrutiny, backed down from its attempts to control the town completely. A new spirit seemed to flow through the streets, a sense that maybe things could be different, could be better. Owen found that he liked wearing the badge more than he expected. He had always believed in justice, in standing up for what was right, and now he had the authority to make that belief real. He was fair but firm, and the townspeople, most of whom had been as much victims of the old corruption as Rebecca had been, responded well to his leadership. And through it all, he and Rebecca grew closer. She reopened the boarding house, and he took a room there, the best room, she insisted. They ate breakfast together every morning before he started his rounds. They took walks in the evening, up into the hills where the air was clear and they could talk without being overheard. They spoke of serious things and silly things, of pasts and futures, of dreams and fears. One evening, about 6 weeks after they had returned to Granite, Owen took her hand as they walked and did not let go. She looked at him with a question in her eyes, and he answered it the only way that made sense. He kissed her, gently because she was still healing in ways that went beyond the physical, and she kissed him back with a fierceness that told him everything he needed to know about where her heart was. I love you, he said when they finally broke apart. I think I have since the moment I saw you trying to stand up in that street. You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I love you. I love you too, Rebecca said, and her smile was the first truly unguarded one he had seen from her. I love your kindness and your courage. I love that you saw me when no one else would. I love that you stayed. I will always stay, he promised. If you will have me. I will have you, Owen Hackett, today and every day after. They were married 2 months later in a ceremony performed by Reverend Ashford, the same preacher who had given that sermon about justice. The whole town turned out for the wedding, which was held in the boarding house's front parlor because Rebecca wanted to be married in the place she had fought so hard to keep. Mrs. Chen made Rebecca's dress, a beautiful creation of ivory silk that made her look like something out of a dream. Mr. Goldstein closed his store for the day to attend, bringing a gift of fine china for their household. Marshal Wright came back for the occasion, standing up as Owen's best man. Sheriff Peterson made the trip from Silver Ridge. Even some of the miners, men who had been ashamed of their silence when Rebecca needed help, came to pay their respects and offer their apologies, which she accepted with grace. Owen stood at the front of the parlor, in his best clothes, the badge temporarily set aside for the day, and watched Rebecca walk toward him. Her face had healed completely, leaving her as beautiful as he had imagined she would be. But it was not her beauty that took his breath away. It was the light in her eyes, the joy in her smile, the way she looked at him as though he were her whole world. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Ashford began, and Owen barely heard the words. He was too busy looking at Rebecca, at the woman who had shown him what courage really meant, at the future they were promising to build together. When it came time for the vows, Rebecca spoke first, her voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to be your partner, your companion, your friend. You saved my life, Owen, but more than that, you gave me back my hope. I will spend the rest of my days showing you what that means to me." Owen's throat was tight when it was his turn. "I promise to protect you, to honor you, to love you with all my heart. You taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but standing up anyway. You taught me what it means to fight for something that matters. I was lost before I found you, Rebecca, and I will never be lost again as long as you are with me." They exchanged simple gold bands, and when Ashford pronounced them married, Owen kissed his wife with a tenderness that held all the promise of their future. The room erupted in applause and cheers, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing. Owen held Rebecca close as they swayed to a fiddle tune, and he thought about how much had changed in just a few months. He had gone from a drifter with no ties to a husband and a sheriff, a man with purpose and place. And it had all started with a decision to not look away, to not ride past a woman in need. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "I am thinking about how lucky I am, how easily I could have ridden past you that day. But you did not." "No, I did not." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "And I never will. Whatever comes, Rebecca, we face it together." "Together," she agreed, and kissed him again, while their friends and neighbors cheered. They spent their wedding night in the finest room of the boarding house, the one Rebecca had always kept for special guests. She had prepared it with care, filling it with candles and fresh flowers from the late autumn garden. They came together with a tenderness that spoke of deep love and deeper trust. And when Owen held his wife in his arms afterward, he knew he had finally found where he belonged. The weeks turned into months, and autumn gave way to the harsh Colorado winter. Owen continued as sheriff, and when the town held elections in January of 1877, they elected him officially by a landslide. He took the oath seriously, working to build a fair and safe community. Rebecca's boarding house thrived, known throughout the territory as a place of cleanliness, good food, and honest dealing. They built a life together in those months. Owen moved his belongings permanently into Rebecca's room, and they talked late into the night about their dreams. Rebecca wanted to expand the boarding house eventually, maybe add a second floor. Owen wanted to start breeding horses, using the land behind the building. They wanted children someday, a family to fill the spaces that had been empty in both their lives. In March, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening after supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. He was silent for a long moment, and she started to worry. Then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around carefully before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Rebecca, we are going to have a baby." "We are," she confirmed. laughing at his excitement. Are you happy? Happy does not even begin to cover it. He knelt down and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach as though he might hear their child. When? October, the doctor thinks. October. He stood and pulled her close. A baby in October. Our baby. They spent the summer preparing. Owen built a cradle with his own hands, working on it in the evenings by lamplight, sanding every edge until it was smooth as glass. Rebecca sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with the same precision she brought to everything. They argued good-naturedly about names, finally agreeing that they would wait until they met their child to decide. The boarding house continued to run smoothly, though Rebecca gradually had to accept more help as her pregnancy advanced. Several of the women in town, including Mrs. Chen, came by regularly to assist with the heavier work. Owen worried constantly, afraid something would go wrong, but Rebecca remained calm and confident. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she reminded him. I am healthy and strong. We will be fine. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1877, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the entire process. Owen, who had been pacing outside the room while the midwife attended Rebecca, burst through the door the moment he heard the baby's voice. He found his wife exhausted but radiant, holding a squirming bundle wrapped in one of her handmade blankets. It is a boy, she said, smiling up at him. We have a son, Owen. He crossed the room in 2 strides and looked down at his child for the first time. The baby had dark hair like his mother, and a determined expression that made Owen laugh even as tears streamed down his face. He is perfect. You are perfect. Rebecca, I love you so much. I love you too. She shifted the baby slightly. Do you want to hold him? Owen had held guns and ropes, had handled wild horses, and even wilder men, but nothing had ever felt as terrifying or wonderful as taking his newborn son into his arms. The baby was so small, so fragile, yet he could feel the life pulsing through the tiny body. His son opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to stare right at Owen with a focus that was probably accidental but felt profound. Hello, little one, Owen whispered. I am your father, and I promise I will always keep you safe. I promise I will teach you to be strong and kind. I promise I will show you what it means to stand up for what is right. What should we name him? Rebecca asked. They had discussed many names, but now, looking at his son, Owen knew. Henry, after my father. Henry Owen Hackett. Henry, Rebecca repeated softly. I like that. Welcome to the world, Henry. The baby let out another cry, and Owen carefully handed him back to Rebecca, watching as she began to nurse him with the same calm competence she brought to everything. He sat beside them on the bed, one arm around his wife, one hand gently touching his son's head, and felt a completeness he had never known was possible. Fatherhood changed Owen in ways he had not expected. He became even more committed to keeping Granite safe, knowing now that his son would grow up in this town. He worked with the town council to establish a school, something Rebecca had always wanted and made sure it was built to last. He continued to serve as sheriff, turning down offers of supposedly better positions in bigger towns because this was home now, this was where his family was. Rebecca bloomed as a mother. She balanced running the boarding house with caring for Henry and somehow made it look easy even though Owen knew it was not. She sang to their son, told him stories, carried him around the building as she worked so he could see everything and everyone. The boarders loved having a baby in the house, and more than one tough miner was reduced to foolish coos and faces trying to make Henry smile. When Henry was 6 months old, Rebecca told Owen she wanted to have more children. I was an only child, and it was lonely, she said. I want Henry to have brothers and sisters. Then we will give him brothers and sisters, Owen agreed readily. He would have given Rebecca anything she asked for, but the truth was he wanted a large family too, wanted to fill their lives with the love and laughter that had been missing from both their childhoods. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1879, a tiny thing with her father's gray eyes and a disposition that was somehow both fierce and sweet. They named her Anna, after Owen's sister, and he cried when he held her for the first time, thinking about the sister he had lost and the daughter he had gained. Rebecca understood without him having to explain, just held him and let him cry out years of grief while their newborn daughter slept peacefully in his arms. Henry, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, watching her sleep, touching her tiny hands with careful fingers. Owen and Rebecca would watch their children together, marveling at what they had created, at how their love had grown to encompass these two small lives. "Do you ever think about that day in the street?" Rebecca asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Henry was playing at their feet, and Anna was asleep in Rebecca's arms. "I think about it often," Owen admitted. "I think about how easily things could have gone differently if I had ridden through an hour earlier or later, if I had not had the courage to stop, if you had not had the courage to accept my help." "I almost did not," Rebecca said quietly. "Trust men, I mean. After what they did, I thought about refusing anyone who came near. But there was something about you, Owen, something in your eyes that told me you were different. You were different too. You were broken but not beaten. I saw that courage in you, and it called to something in me." He reached over and took her free hand. "You changed my life, Rebecca. Gave me a purpose, a home, a family. Everything I am now, everything we have built, it started because you refused to give up. We built it together," she corrected gently. "Your courage matched mine. That is why it worked." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Henry eventually climbed into Owen's lap and fell asleep there, tired from his play. Anna stirred and made soft baby noises, and Rebecca smiled down at her with infinite tenderness. "I am happy," Rebecca said finally. "Completely, truly happy. I know that is not something everyone gets to say, so I want to say it now while I am feeling it so fully. You gave me that, Owen. You and our children. You gave it to me too," he said. "I was a man without a home, without purpose, just drifting from job to job, waiting for something to matter. And then I saw you, and everything mattered." Over the years that followed, they continued building their life and their family. Another son came in 1881, named Thomas after the grandfather he would never meet. Then another daughter in 1883, Catherine, called Kate by everyone who knew her. Their family grew and their love deepened, and the boarding house that Rebecca had fought so hard to keep became a true home filled with noise and life and joy. Owen served as sheriff for 12 years total, finally stepping down in 1888 when he felt Granite was stable enough to trust to someone else. He focused on his horse breeding business, which had grown successful beyond his expectations. Rebecca expanded the boarding house just as she had dreamed, adding a second floor and hiring help to manage the increased load. Their children grew strong and healthy. Henry inherited his mother's determination and his father's sense of justice, eventually becoming a lawyer. Anna had her father's way with animals and her mother's sharp mind, and she shocked everyone by announcing her intention to become a veterinarian. Thomas was quieter than his siblings, more thoughtful, and he found his calling as a teacher. Kate was the wild one, always climbing trees and getting into scrapes, and she grew up to run a freight business that spanned 3 territories. Through all of it, Owen and Rebecca remained devoted to each other. They still took walks in the evening when they could, still talked about everything and nothing, still held hands like newlyweds. Their love was the foundation on which everything else was built, and it never wavered. In the summer of 1895, nearly 19 years after that day in the street, Rebecca and Owen sat together on the porch of their boarding house, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Henry had married a wonderful woman and had 3 children of his own. Anna, still unmarried but happy in her unconventional life, visited often. Thomas and Kate were both off pursuing their dreams, but wrote regularly. "Do you have any regrets? Rebecca asked, her head resting on Owen's shoulder. They were both gray now, marked by time and life, but still strong, still together. Not a single one, Owen said honestly. Everything I ever wanted I found with you. Even though you had to deal with a stubborn woman who refused to leave town when she should have, especially because of that. He kissed the top of her head. Your courage saved us both, Rebecca. I was lost before you, and I have been found ever since. She lifted her head to look at him, and he saw in her eyes the same fierce spirit he had recognized that first day, tempered now by years and wisdom, but still burning bright. I would do it all again, you know. Every moment, every struggle, every joy. I would do it all again to end up right here with you. As would I, he said, and kissed her there in the fading light, surrounded by the evidence of their love and their life. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as years do. They lost friends to age and illness, but they also welcomed new grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren into the world. The boarding house became a landmark in Granite, known throughout Colorado as a place that represented the best of what the West could be. Owen and Rebecca grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing, but their love remaining constant. They sat together in the evenings, holding hands and watching the mountains they had grown to love. They told stories to their grandchildren about the old days, about how they had met, about the courage it took to build something good in a hard place. In their final years, neither could remember a time before they were together. Their lives had become so intertwined, so completely merged, that they were simply Owen and Rebecca, a single unit that had weathered every storm. When Owen died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78 in 1928, Rebecca held his hand and whispered that she would see him soon. She followed him 3 months later, dying in the same bed, in the same room where they had spent so many happy nights. Their children and grandchildren surrounded her, and her last words were about Owen, about the cowboy who had stopped his horse one September day and refused to look away. They were buried side by side in the granite cemetery, their stones marking them as husband and wife, partners, parents, and pioneers. But more than that, they were remembered as two people who had found in each other the courage to stand against injustice, the strength to build something good, and the love to make it last a lifetime. The boarding house continued to operate for another generation, run by their children and then their grandchildren, a legacy of the woman who had fought to keep it and the man who had helped her win that fight. And in Granite, when people talked about courage, they did not just mean the courage to face danger or hardship. They meant the courage to help when it was easier to look away, the courage to stand when it was easier to run, and the courage to love even when the world tried to break you. That was the legacy of Owen and Rebecca Hackett, and it lived on long after they were gone, a testament to the truth that real courage is not about being unafraid, but about doing what is right regardless of the cost. Their story became part of the town's history, told and retold around dinner tables and in schoolrooms, a reminder that one person's decision to not look away can change everything. And somewhere in the mountains above Granite, where the air is thin and the view stretches forever, you can almost hear the echo of their voices on the wind, laughing together, loving together, living the happily ever after they had both earned through courage, through sacrifice, and through an unwavering commitment to each other and to what was right. Their love story was not perfect, but it was real. It was not easy, but it was worth it. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built from that foundation a life of joy and meaning. They had raised a family, built a community, and shown everyone around them what it meant to stand for something greater than yourself. The boarding house still stands in Granite today, over 100 years later, preserved as a historical site. Visitors can walk through the rooms where Owen and Rebecca lived and loved, can see the cradle Owen built with his own hands, can read the letters they wrote to each other during the rare times they were apart. And if you listen closely, the guides will tell you, you can almost feel their presence still, a warmth in the air that speaks of enduring love. Because some loves are too strong to fade, too true to be forgotten. Some loves change not just the people who experience them, but everyone those people touch. Owen and Rebecca's love was like that, a force that shaped their family, their town, and everyone who heard their story. And it all began with a choice, a moment of decision when a cowboy saw past the bruises to recognize the courage underneath, when he chose to stop instead of riding past, when he chose to see a fellow human in need and act accordingly. That choice rippled out through time, creating waves of consequence that touched hundreds of lives. In the end, that is what courage really is. Not grand gestures or heroic battles, though those have their place. Real courage is the daily decision to do right, to help when you can, to love without holding back, to stand for what you believe in even when it costs you. Real courage is looking at someone the world has beaten down and seeing not their injuries but their strength, not their defeat but their potential. Owen saw that in Rebecca, and she saw in him a kindness and honor that matched her own. Together, they built something beautiful from the ashes of violence and injustice. Together, they proved that love and courage can triumph over cruelty and corruption. Together, they lived a life that mattered. And when people in Granite talk about the old days, about the time when the town found its soul and its purpose, they always come back to the same story, the story of a woman who refused to be broken and a cowboy who refused to look away. The story of two people who found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. The story of Owen and Rebecca Hackett, whose love built a legacy that would last forever. Their story reminds us that heroes do not always wear badges or carry guns, though sometimes they do. Heroes are the people who choose compassion over convenience, who choose action over apathy, who choose to see the humanity in others even when it would be easier not to. Owen was a hero the day he stopped his horse and offered help. Rebecca was a hero every day she stood for what was right, even when it nearly killed her. But more than heroes, they were human. They had fears and doubts. They made mistakes. They struggled with all the challenges that come with building a life and raising a family. What made them special was not that they were perfect, but that they kept trying, kept loving, kept believing in each other and in the possibility of something better. That is the real lesson of their story. Not that love conquers all in some fairy tale way, but that love gives us the strength to face whatever comes. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That one person stopping to help, one person refusing to give up, can change not just individual lives, but entire communities. So their story lives on, passed down through generations, adapted and retold, but always true at its core. Because some truths are timeless. The truth that courage matters. The truth that love endures. The truth that doing right, even when it is hard, even when it costs you, is always worth it in the end. Owen and Rebecca Hackett proved that truth with every day of their lives together. They proved it in how they loved each other, how they raised their children, how they served their community. They proved it in the small moments and the large ones, in times of joy and times of sorrow, in sickness and health, in youth and age. Their love story was written in the Wild West, in a time and place that was often harsh and unforgiving. But they found in each other a refuge from that harshness, a partnership that made everything bearable and everything beautiful. They found in each other not just romantic love, though that was certainly there, but a profound friendship, a deep respect, and an unwavering commitment that lasted until their final breaths. And long after they were gone, their love remained, a bright spot in the history of a rough mining town. A reminder that even in the darkest times, even in the hardest places, love and courage can create something lasting and true. Their boarding house stood as a monument to what they built together. Their children and grandchildren carried forward their values. Their story inspired others to choose courage, to choose compassion, to choose love. That is their happily ever after. Not just the years they spent together, though those were precious, but the legacy they left behind. They changed Granite from a town ruled by corruption and fear into a community built on justice and hope. They showed everyone around them what was possible when two people committed to each other and to doing right. In the end, the bruises that had once made Rebecca unrecognizable faded away, but the courage Owen saw in her that first day never did. It burned bright through all their years together, matched by his own courage, creating a light that guided not just their family, but their entire community. And that light still shines today in the stories people tell, in the values they pass down, in the choices they make to help instead of looking away. Owen and Rebecca Hackett lived a life that mattered. They loved deeply, fought for what was right, raised a beautiful family, and left the world better than they found it. Their story, born from violence and suffering, became a testament to the power of courage and love to overcome anything. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, you can imagine them together still, Owen and Rebecca, holding hands and watching over the town they loved, the family they built, the legacy they created, together as they always were, as they always will be. Two souls who found each other against all odds and proved that true courage is not just facing danger, but recognizing the strength in others and choosing to stand with them no matter what. That is their story. That is their truth. That is their happily ever after, earned through struggle and sacrifice, built on a foundation of love and courage, lasting forever in the hearts of all who hear about the cowboy who saw past the bruises to recognize the courage underneath, and the woman who taught him what it really means to be brave.